Terezin is located in the northern Czech Republic. It's about a 45-minute drive from Prague. During World War II, the Czech Republic and Slovakia were one country, known as Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia separated in 1993 into the two countries you see today. The Czech Republic borders Germany, Poland, Slovakia, and Austria. One of the things that differentiates Terezin from other concentration camps is that it was a structure that had already existed before the war. Terezin is composed of a small fortress located here and a large or main fortress located here. The fortress was built in the late 1700s. During World War II, the small fortress was used as a prison, and the main fortress was used as a ghetto. A large brick wall enclosed each fortress, and you can still kind of make out the star-like outline. The distance between the two fortresses is about 1.4 kilometers, or about 0.8 miles. So it takes about 20 minutes to walk from one fortress to the other. Here I've zoomed in to the small fortress, which we'll go through first. The parking lot is over here. From there, you walk along this long pathway, crossing a moat by walking over a bridge, and arriving at the main entrance, located by the pink star. In this presentation, we'll visit where the blue stars are: the first prison courtyard, the large fourth prison courtyard, and the third prison courtyard, which is where the women were kept. The red star is where there were mass graves in this area, and there was an execution area over here. The yellow star is the location of the National Cemetery. This is the gate we'll pass through to enter the small fortress. Unlike most concentration camp memorials, which are free to visit, there is a small admission fee to enter the small fortress. You may come across these two spellings for the camp and ghetto. The first, Terezin, is the Czech spelling and pronunciation. Theresienstadt is the German spelling and pronunciation. I'll be using the Czech pronunciation Terezin. As I mentioned on a previous slide, the fortress was built in the 1700s. In World War II, the Nazis started using the small fortress as a prison in 1940. The main fortress was turned into a ghetto and transit camp the following year in 1941. Through the main entrance, we turn to the left, and this is the administrative courtyard. Offices in this area included where the prisoners were registered, where interrogations took place, and is where the office of the prison commander was located. In the distance, you can see the entrance to the first prison courtyard at Terezin. Here's a closer look at the entrance to the first prisoner courtyard with the famous phrase, Arbeit macht frei. The phrase means, work sets you free, which of course was a lie. This phrase can be seen on the gates of several concentration camps, including Auschwitz and Dachau, to name a few. In the first prisoner courtyard, Men would have to stand in this open area for roll call. Located in this area are 17 mass cells, 20 solitary cells, bathing and disinfection rooms, a prisoner kitchen, and an infirmary, which was located in Block A, shown here. The package room is located through this door to the right, and this is a photo of inside. Twice a month, prisoners could ask their relatives to send them a package. Incoming packages were checked and sometimes robbed by the guards, so rarely did a package reach the prisoner intact. Tools were stored in this room to the left. The sign reads, "The First Courtyard." Mass cells and solitary cells of the first courtyard could house up to 1,500 people. There was a courtyard commander's office, keeping files of prisoners forced to labor, along with the prison kitchen, potato and food storages, and a so-called package room. The photo here in the top left is one of the mass cells, which initially housed 20 to 40 men. As time went on, they would squeeze over 100 men into these cells. The photo on the bottom left is one of the Jewish cells. These cells had no beds, and they were only given a bucket to use for the bathroom. The window you see had to remain closed, so they got very little fresh air. About 60 prisoners were kept in these cells. Shown in the photo to the right is part of the infirmary, where the sick or injured prisoners would report to. A nearby sign reads, "Hygiene and medical facilities." Sanitary conditions and medical care in the police prison were totally inadequate. In the first courtyard, there were gradually established 2 sick rooms and a bathroom with delousing station. Male washroom was moved here in 1944. Treatment of prisoners was ensured by prison doctors, who were mostly powerless due to the lack of necessary equipment and medicine. They primarily struggled with infectious diseases. This is the disinfection room, where the delousing of clothes was done. These devices primarily used hot steam to disinfect. In this photo, you can see one of the shared washrooms. Along either side, you can see faucets and sinks. This photo shows the shower room. Showers were usually offered on Saturdays, if at all. This is a view down another section of courtyard number 1, where more cells are located. Back outside the courtyard, you can walk through an underground corridor that was part of the original fortress defense system. This corridor runs about a half a mile and is open for visitors to walk through. During World War II, these underground corridors were not used and were walled up. As you exit the underground tunnel, you enter the area of the small fortress known as the execution site. In the grassy area near the brick wall, was an area originally used as a shooting range, but executions began in 1943. A small memorial now stands where prisoners once stood in front of a firing squad. In total, it's estimated between 250 and 300 prisoners were executed here. According to the memorial site, the last and largest execution took place on May 2, 1945, when 49 men and 3 women were executed, just 6 days before liberation. Prior to using mass graves, bodies were cremated. At the end of February 1945, mass graves were dug in this large open area. On the cement slab, it reads, "Mass graves." In 1945, mass graves of prisoners were uncovered on this site. Remains of 601 victims were exhumed and then buried in the National Cemetery. The National Cemetery mentioned is located near the entrance to the small fortress, which we will be visiting shortly. This bronze statue to the left is titled Nameless and is in tribute to those unidentified victims of the Holocaust. The gallows can be seen to the right and is where prisoners were hung. In this presentation, we arrived at the execution grounds through that underground tunnel system. But prisoners would have reached those grounds by passing through this corridor known as the Gate of Death. As we leave the execution site and make our way to the cinema used by the SS, we pass a large swimming pool used by the Nazi guards and their families. The photo to the left is across from the pool. I took this picture because I thought the bold contrast of colors was powerful. The cinema is located in part of this building. The cinema was used by the Nazis, and the furnishings are original. Now visitors can watch a documentary about the history of the small fortress in here. As we leave the cinema, we approach the gate to the massive fourth courtyard. The fourth prison courtyard was established in 1943 and it's made up of mass cells and solitary confinement cells. Nearby, this granite plaque lists all of the camps to which prisoners were deported from the fortress. According to the memorial site, about 32,000 people passed through the prison during the war. In front of the plaque is a symbolic metal eternal flame. To the left is a sculpture titled Shadows of the Executed Prisoners. To the right is a memorial known as the Mourning Hall, which is near the entrance to the fourth courtyard. Here we've entered the large fourth courtyard. Mass cells are located to the left and solitary confinement cells to the right. According to the Terezin Memorial, by the end of the war, there were 400, 600, and sometimes up to 1,000 in each cell. There were only 2 toilets in the mass cells. Because of the horrible living conditions and lack of hygiene, disease spread rapidly, and by the end of the war, there was a typhus epidemic in this area of the camp. These photos are of some of the mass cells in the fourth courtyard. The sign reads, "Increasing number of prisoners resulted in beginning of the construction of a new courtyard in 1943. In autumn 1944, first prisoners came into the still damp and unfinished mass cells. The whole courtyard was able to hold up to 3,000 men. Due to catastrophic hygienic conditions and overcrowded cells, typhus epidemic broke out in the spring of 1945. At the very end of the war, but also in the first weeks after the liberation, it still claimed hundreds of victims." At the far end of the courtyard, we come to this plaque, which reads, "Execution as a warning. 3 men and a woman were executed at this point on March 3, 1945, in retaliation for the escape of prisoners from cell number 38. Although these were known as solitary confinement cells, 10 to 12 people were typically housed in each cell. The nearby sign reads, "Solitary cells. This block houses a total of 125 solitary cells, which were packed with prisoners from evacuation transports in 1945. Part of them served as a mortuary after the outbreak of a typhus epidemic." Now we've left the fourth prison courtyard. As we walk through this courtyard leading to the museum located in the small fortress, we come across these haunting sculptures. During World War II, this building housed SS barracks. Now the building houses a museum open to visitors. Throughout the museum, different depictions of a hand serve as a backdrop to various themes of each section. I found these murals captivating, so I've included several pictures of them. In this case are a pair of SS boots, a whip, and a metal chain that was used to handcuff prisoners as they were escorted throughout the camp. Again, another set of photos of the hand murals. In this case are a prisoner's jacket, pants, and shoes. Prisoners were issued a bowl or a cup and a spoon. They took great care to guard these items as they were essential to hold the little coffee and soup they were given. In the bowl is an example of what a daily ration of bread would look like. These are the remaining 4 hand murals. In these cases are items made by the prisoners. Oftentimes, prisoners made little dolls and toys like these for the children who were confined in the Terezin Ghetto. Near the museum is the House of Lords, where typically 12 to 15 head guards and their families lived. The guards and their families were served by female prisoners, made to do chores such as cooking, cleaning, childcare. Male prisoners were used for the building maintenance and performed any needed repairs. Today, the building is not open to visitors. As we make our way back towards the entrance to the small fortress, we come across the third courtyard, which was known as the women's section. The sign reads, "The third courtyard, female courtyard." This yard was established in June 1942 as a women's prison department. In addition to mass cells, there were also solitary cells and workshops for working women prisoners, a sick room, and since 1944, also a washroom and a bathroom. As we exit the small fortress, we pass by the large National Cemetery, where the remains of thousands of victims of Terezin and another nearby camp were laid to rest. There is a section with the remains of Jewish victims, seen here, and again you can see the Star of David here and the Jewish section up here. And then in this section, where the remains of Christian victims are buried. The main fortress, or large fortress, is located here. This fortress became known as the Terezin Ghetto. To get there, we'll leave the small fortress up here and travel down this long path, cross the river, and enter through the low water gate, represented by the yellow star here, and again here. In this aerial view, you can make out the star-like borders of the main fortress, similar to what we saw with the small fortress. And as you can see, a majority of the buildings are confined here in the center. The columbarium, crematorium, and a Jewish and Russian cemetery are found on the outskirts, represented by these red stars. We'll also visit the Ghetto Museum, shown by this blue star, and the Magdeburg Barracks, represented by this blue star. We'll also look at this Central Park area, shown by the pink star, and we'll learn what role this area had with the International Red Cross delegation that visited there in 1944. As we near the end of the 20-minute walk from the small fortress, we cross over this river to enter the main fortress. Through the gate ahead, we'll enter the main fortress. A sign near the gate reads, "The Low Water Gate," built in 1782 as part of the internal defense circuit. Casemate guard rooms were located inside the gate. The gate was closed by doors and a drawbridge. During World War II, this building primarily housed teenage boys. It is here where these teenage boys created a magazine called Vedum. The magazine consisted of drawings, stories, jokes, poems, all made by the boys. They made copies by hand, and this was all done secretly without the SS knowing. A majority of these teen boys ended up being transported to Auschwitz, where they were killed in the gas chambers. Today, this building now houses the Terezin Ghetto Museum. On the next slide, we'll see walls containing the names of these children, but this sign provides us with some background. Among the prisoners who were sent to the camp at Terezin were over 10,500 children who were under 15 at the time of deportation. About 400 of them died in Terezin, while the rest mostly found themselves on the deportation transports to extermination camps in the east, where over 7,500 of these youngest victims of the final solution of the Jewish question died. To our present knowledge, only 245 children returned from these transports to the east. The names of 24 children from Bialystok who were killed have not been discovered. We also do not know the names of all of the dead from the evacuation transports which arrived in Terezin at the end of the war. This room is devoted to the memory of those murdered children and records the names of these, the most defenseless victims, whose lives were ended at their very beginning. Each name hides a boy or girl who had their dreams, hopes, and childish loves. All this was murdered together with them. The message of their fates still speaks to us today and must never be forgotten. Research into the fates of the Terezin children still goes on, and those whose names are discovered in the future will be added to the memorial list of victims here. As you can see, there are several large displays on the walls that list the names of the thousands of children who perished. You can get an idea of how many names there are by looking at how small the script is. These photos just show two walls displaying the names. There were actually additional walls in this section that had more names. Thousands of drawings by children in Terezin were secretly saved as a testament to their existence. Some of those drawings are on display here in the museum. The Pinkas Synagogue in Prague also has a collection of the drawings on display there. Here are some additional dolls made for the children in the ghetto. A drawing of a fairy tale illustration is seen here, and the card next to it says that fairy tales helped children deal with the gloom of prison life. The picture below in the middle is of an armband for the blind, consisting of a yellow band and 3 black dots. These armbands were used to identify those who were blind, similar to how different colored triangular patches were used to identify groups of people, such as homosexuals, political prisoners, Jehovah's Witnesses, etc. Initially, in the center of town, there was a fence around this big open park-like square, which made it off limits to prisoners in the ghetto. However, there was a beautification project in 1944 because the International Committee of the Red Cross was going to pay a visit to the camp to essentially see if the rumors were true about Jews being treated badly and reports of extermination. The Nazis used this opportunity to secretly create an atmosphere of deceit and propaganda. As part of the beautification process, the fence was removed and a park recreation area was built, complete with a playground for children and a music pavilion. They also built a cafe, shops, and a bank that was stocked with fake camp money. As part of the preparation for the Red Cross visit, the ghetto was renamed a, quote, Jewish settlement area, end quote. Children were made to perform plays, complete with costumes and sets. Much of this was filmed by the Nazis and was used in propaganda to make it appear to the world that the Jews were enjoying their time in these resettlement camps. This is a photo of the Magdeburg barracks, and the plaque on it reads, "The residence of the so-called camp self-government and of the Jewish Alderman Council, designed by the Nazis. Some of the council members and the representatives of the self-government worked dauntlessly against the provisions of the SS commander. The most of them were executed or died after the transportation from Terezin." These are some examples of artwork done by the prisoners that are on display in the Magdeburg barracks. This is on display in the Magdeburg barracks and is a reproduction of what a typical women's barrack in the ghetto would look like. As you can see, not only would a person have no privacy, but the large numbers of people confined to such small spaces, in addition to poor access to hygiene, would have lent itself to the spread of diseases and illnesses. To the left are remains of the original railroad track that not only brought prisoners to Terezin, but also transported prisoners away to various camps such as Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and Auschwitz-Birkenau for extermination. The plaque on the right can be seen back here on this wall in the distance, and it shows men, women, and children on their way to being transported. At one point in the ghetto, those who died or were killed were put in wooden coffins and transported by a wheeled hearse, such as this one, to grave sites outside of the ghetto walls. The photo in the lower right is the crematorium located in the vicinity of the cemetery. 4 sets of ovens in the crematorium can be seen here. Between 1942 and 1945, about 30,000 people were cremated here. This area is known as the columbarium. The plaque reads, "In the corridors of this fortification, cardboard urns containing the ashes of dead prisoners were deposited. All the urns, actually about 25,000, were removed by the SS at the end of 1944. Most of the ashes were thrown into the River Ore. The remaining ashes were buried near the Litomyshcherza concentration camp. The cardboard urns seen to the right do not actually contain ashes, but are shown to represent what they would have looked like. So each of these white boxes would represent a cardboard urn." These are some additional pictures of the mortuary area. This photo shows a portion of the Jewish cemetery where around 9,000 victims of the Terezin Ghetto are located. It's a little hard to see from this view, but here in the distance is a large statue of stone representing a menorah. Near the path leading to the crematorium and cemetery, there is this huge suspended rock. The dedication plaque reads, "Presented by the European Jewish Congress on behalf of the Jewish communities of Europe, in memory of those incarcerated and murdered in the Terezin Jewish Ghetto and all the 6 million victims of the Shoah on the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps, January 27th, 2015. The memory of the Shoah should rise above the graves of the victims like a bridge to the future." I was unaware of this memorial prior to my trip, and I had some confusion about what the massive stone represented. So when I got home, I went to the European Jewish Congress webpage and found an article dated June 5th, 2018 that helped to explain. The article stated, quote, "This monument symbolizes the Jewish experience throughout the ages, a history of violent persecutions, but also one of resilience and responsibility," said Dr. Moshe Kantor. And it goes on to say, quote, "The nature of the stone is meant to capture the eternity of grief and its immensity, the magnitude of the burden of the Jewish people," end quote. In 2023, a movie titled Terezin came out. Although the movie's story is fictional, it was filmed on location in Terezin. So if you see the movie, you'll recognize some of the sites you just saw in this presentation. If you'd like to learn more about the teen boys in the Terezin Ghetto who created their own magazine, Vedem, I recommend the book We Are Children Just the Same, Vedem, the Secret Magazine by the Boys of Terezin. The book contains stories of poetry that they wrote and includes many of their original drawings. And it was originally published in 1995, but if you go online to look for it, it looks like they also did a reprinted version again in 2013. And their work is truly a gift to humanity.